Car dealers use anchoring to manipulate us into paying high prices. We are inclined to judge whether we are getting a good deal by comparing the final negotiated price to the dealer's initial price, no matter how unrealistic the initial price. Thus, an experienced car salesman starts the haggling with a high price. Another human foible is an ignorance of regression to the mean. Kahneman once tried to convince Israeli flight instructors that trainees would progress faster if they were praised instead of punished. A senior instructor objected, telling Kahneman that, "On many occasions I have praised flight cadets for clean execution of some aerobatic maneuver, and in general, when they try it again, they do worse. On the other hand, I have often screamed at cadets for bad execution, and in general, they do better the next time. So please don't tell us that reinforcement works and punishment does not, because the opposite is the case." Perhaps the pilots who were praised for doing well became complacent and less attentive, while those who were screamed at for doing poorly became more focused and energized by a fear of being kicked out of the training program. Kahneman knew that there was another, completely different explanation. He drew a target on the floor with chalk and asked each instructor to turn his back to the target and throw 2 coins, one after the other, at the target. Kahneman measured the distance of each coin from the target. Some officers did better than others, but the officers who were closest on their first toss tended to do not as well on their second toss, while the reverse was true of those who were farthest away on their first toss. Did their ability somehow change between the 2 tosses, with the best tossers becoming complacent and the worst tossers more focused? Not likely, because none of the officers looked at the result of the first toss before making the second toss. The clincher is that if we analyze the data in reverse order, those who did best on their second toss generally did worse on their first toss, while those who did poorly on their second toss usually did better on their first toss. How could the second toss possibly have influenced the first toss? The answer to this seeming paradox is that those officers who did well on either toss generally had some good luck in the angle and force with which they tossed the coin and the way the coin bounced and rolled after landing. Unusual luck cannot be counted on to repeat, so they typically didn't do as well on their other toss. Similarly, those officers who did poorly on one toss were generally unlucky on that toss and not so unlucky on the other toss. In the same way, some pilots surely have more ability than others, but there's also an element of luck involved in that no matter what their ability, each pilot has flights that are better or worse than others. Those cadets who had the best flights compared to other pilots are more likely to have had good luck than bad luck and are generally not as far above average in ability as they were in performance. They will usually not do as well on their next flight, whether the instructor praises them, screams at them, or says nothing at all. The senior instructor who chastised Kahneman mistakenly thought that his praise made the cadets do worse, when the truth is that they are not as good as they seem to be. Similarly, the cadets who had the weakest flights were on average not as incompetent as they seemed and should do better on their next flight, even if the instructor can control his screaming. Kahneman later related that, "I knew that this demonstration would not undo the effects of lifelong exposure to a perverse contingency. Nonetheless, the experience was eye-opening. This was a joyous moment in which I understood an important truth about the world, because we tend to reward others when they do well and punish them when they do badly, and because there is regression to the mean, it is part of the human condition that we are statistically punished for rewarding others and rewarded for punishing them." Pilot Training Scores. Reed Dorsey Palmatier, a former student and now a professor, and I, investigated Kahneman's memorable anecdote with actual U.S. Navy flight training data. These data demonstrate how flight scores are susceptible to regression, and more importantly, show how to assess changes in a pilot's ability as the training proceeds. Our data came from the final stage of a 6-phase aviation training track for naval aviators. In this carrier qualifying phase, the pilots practice solo landings on a naval aircraft carrier under the supervision of an officer stationed on the carrier who grades each flight and debriefs the pilots afterwards. In a carrier landing, the pilot aims for the middle one of 3 arresting wires on the deck of an aircraft carrier. Here is Lieutenant Corey Johnston's description. The daytime landing pattern begins overhead the ship at anywhere from 2,000